I'm Supermoon Tarot, and I'm here with my BFF Mon Mon, who, may I add and compliment, is just growing new, beautiful leaves every day in every way. And she had me thinking about sort of an unspoken goal of mine. I would like to film a spiritual talks video one day where I'm just completely engulfed by her canopy of leaves, and I'm just like popping out being like, hey, did you know this? Hey, do you want to talk about this? So one day when she's probably tripled in size, look out for that future video. So Mon Mon and I want to talk about cord cutting. This might be a foreign term, or you might be really familiar with it. It is extremely common. It is extremely influential, and it is something you want to remove. I'm going to be going over the hows and the whys and the process. But first, let's start with, what are the cords? What is it? So this is an invisible cord attachment between you and another person. When I say invisible with quotes, it's because if you have a pretty developed third eye, you will be able to see them if you sort of like hone into it. And at the minimum, a lot of you will be able to think of this other person, set the intention of wanting to see if you have any cords between the two of you, and feel it. Feel that intense energy pool. Now here's where it gets interesting. Cords are formed from good connections and interactions and bad. They are all unintentional. This is when you have this sort of cord between you and this other person, some sort of interaction has happened, and it has influenced you enough that your energy fields are sort of forming. We're going to be getting into more specifics of what that entails later on in the video, but understand that when there is a cord connection, it influences you intensely. It makes you overly emotional about the other person. It makes you think about them too often. You just kind of feel unspokenly drawn to them. Now, we're not talking about ideas like when you're in love. This would not have the same sort of unhealthy kind of influence. That's the main reason why you want to remove them. But it happens, they pop up. So you might be asking, how do they form? My spirit guide said that there's actually 3 specific reasons why they form. It can be a past life, which means you run into that other person and you start interacting with each other, and because of the strong enough pull in the past lives you've had together, it starts to form. Remember, you could meet someone and it maybe wasn't the best past life, and you just don't know why this other person has such a volatile reaction towards you, and that can be enough to create a cord attachment, and then suddenly you can't help but want to complain about them. They keep popping up in your mind. That's another way to identify if you have a cord, if you just can't stop feeling frustrated and expressing it to everyone about it. The second one is from having the same kind of energy. Now, this is where it's really interesting. Energy is not always related to emotions. If you've watched my other videos talking about energy, our emotions are responding to energy. So think about it this way. When you go into the kitchen, that has an energy, and that energy is different than when you are in a park. And we're not talking about your first reaction being like happiness, sadness. We're talking about you go in it, and if you close your eyes, you could kind of be like, okay, I feel cozy. You think of adjectives. Often it creates ideas of memories for people. It's a lot of time people are like, oh, I can't quite find the vocabulary, but it feels different when they sense something's different in the room. An energy. You get what I'm saying here. So when you spend a lot of time in a place and be influenced by it so much, you can develop the same kind of energy as that place. A great example is your work environment. This is why sometimes people are unhappy about their place of business wherever they work, and they just can't stop kind of being like, I'm frustrated about it, expressing all the time. They can't let it up. They can't believe how much this simple job is kind of affecting them so much in their personal life. It's because over time the the job place they spend most of their time has influenced them to have the same energy, and then you start mirroring and the chords start forming and the influence starts taking over. And 3, love. But love has many different forms. Love doesn't always have to be just romantic. Love can be from friendship. Sometimes, you don't think of the word, I love this person, but you're coming from that place when you suddenly see someone suffering and you're just like, oh, how can I help them? What can I do? And it starts to pull. Not every time, I want to be clear about this, but these can be the causes. But interestingly enough, this kind of surprised me when my spirit guide told me this, but if somebody is one-sidedly more in love with the other person, that can cause it too. But it can only cause it if, let's say one person, again, this can be romantic, this can be friendship, this can be any kind of love, when this other person is very focused on you and you have sort of a negative reaction back. It's more than just being like, oh no, I don't feel that way. That wouldn't be a chord forming on its own. You'd be like, get away from me. I don't want this. This isn't for me. This is when a chord would start forming and connecting together, which I thought was really interesting. So now, if you watch my other spiritual talks videos, which I highly recommend, you're going to now notice a bunch of things we spoke about previously all coming together with what I'm about to share now. So if you remember, when we talk about a spiritual idea, here is the main core idea, and then we talked about branching points from that main idea. And that because due to there's a lot of unseen layers, I don't know what the specific word would be, like, I don't know if it'd be dimensions. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like parallel dimensions, unseen layers and veils, timelines, things like that. One core idea can have many different sounding ideas that all still come back to the same subject, but still are true. So they just are perceived from a different angle, but still make up the entirety of an idea. The reason I bring up that concept is because when we look at how the human body functions on a spiritual anatomy level. So you're gonna hear me talk about 2 different things when it comes to the influence of chords. On one, we talked about in my spiritual upgrade video, the idea of there being 5 different sections, 37 different layers, and one of those sections talks about the energy body. And in the other part you're going to hear me talk about is I'm going to talk about the influence of the mind, body, and spirit. And this is where it gets interesting. The mind-body, the mind-mind, the spiritual mind, the spiritual body, and the physical mind, physical body. I'll get into this in a second. This will all come together and make sense. So on the one section, again, these are 2 different things that sound like they're totally different, but they do all come together to form the spiritual anatomy. They come together, different ideas coming to the main topic, being perceived on different layers. You get what I'm saying. So on the energy body, that section, this is how the chords form and come together. This is how they're influenced. But the energy body influences I don't know if you can hear that car, hopefully not. The energy body influences the physical body, physical mind. What do I mean when I say that? Now, I do not mean your physical body and physical mind. In spiritual contents, this is what they usually refer to this. You are controlled or piloted by your spirit. Then comes your mind, and then comes your body. But your body is more, physical. Your physical is more things like your survivor instincts. So when we have certain reactions and mindsets, they come from one of these 3 places. So let's say somebody is unkind, but you're able to rise above that and go, oh, they're probably projecting. I feel like I can let this go and I can see the bigger picture. That would be from your spiritual mind. This also goes for your spiritual body, but this is like a whole unique subject. I can make a separate video for this. If you want that, let me know in the comments below. But something like when you have a reaction where you're like, get away from me, and you're trying to protect yourself. Usually this is where our really intense emotional reactions come from. This would be physical mind or physical body. Again, not tangible physical. Think of it as sort of like a metaphor, if you will. So the energy body, this is where it's formed, your energy levels connect, and then it influences your physical body and physical mind. And then if you remember what we talked about in the energy video, this is when your emotions come in. This is when the other parts of you start to be heavily influenced by this. And because we want our spirit mind and spirit body being the pilot and then all of them working in tandem together, if there's too much influence on your physical mind, physical body, it starts to become the main pilot and you don't think rationally, and you start to kind of act out of more instinct rather than what you want to personally choose. Like when you slow down and go, what are your opinions? What are your thoughts? You see what I'm saying here? You can see why you would want to remove them. My spirit guide actually went into a lot more detail into this. They explained that so the way source works, I heard somebody say they didn't know what source is. When I'm referring to source, I'm referring to this idea that source is in me, source is in you, source is in the universe. People have different terms for it. They use the idea of like the universe, but the idea is that we all are made up of the same stuff. And this is when the idea comes together of we are all one, not just that we are all made of one, but one day we will return back to source. Not for a while. We got a couple lives to live. You got to get like awakened and woken, everything like that. But that's the important part, my spirit guide said. They said, you are meant to live your individual life, have your own influences, own experiences, and you're meant to have your own insight and discoveries and epiphanies separately. When these cords come into attachment with you and other people, and that influence starts to happen, it's almost it's not almost, it's kind of recreating what source does. Source kind of magnetizes, comes together, and it's sort of pre-magnetizing you and someone else together in connection and form before you've really earned that. You're meant to have a certain layer of like getting all on the same frequency, the same wavelength, the same energy. I'm using these sort of blanket terms because I'd have to make a whole nother video to explain this, but you're getting the idea. We're meant to get there through living life and having ideas, and having this pre-formed, they said, is an act against free will. And here's the thing with all of these concepts that you'll love to hear, including my spirit guides and your spirit guides and everything like that, they are very pro free will. The universe wants you to have free will and make decisions on your own and not be controlled. If you're talking to anything that's trying to mess with that, you know what I mean? Like, you're meant to have free will. You get what I'm saying here. So another reason why we want to get rid of those cords. So now let's talk about the process as to how to get rid of them, because it's actually incredibly easy and you can do it yourself. And the more you realize how much control you have over you and your own cords and connections and different things like that, the more empowered you will become, and the more you can regularly influence your life, because these things are extremely common. My spirit guide said every single person has cords with other people. You will have them over your life repeatedly. It's super common. It doesn't happen automatically every time. I don't want you to get like paranoid. But it does happen pretty frequently. And so being able to have this ability to sense it and remove it on your own will make you in the moment be able to take power and then live your normal life. So in the process, my spirit guide says that you can only have up to 3 cords between you and someone else. Interestingly enough, these cords are connected to specific parts of your body. So you can have one connected to your tooth, you can have one connected to your eye, and then to someone else's. And the way you identify it is either you close your eyes, you think of the other person, and you imagine an energy line between you and the other person. You can think of it like a golden thread, a big, beautiful light. You can be any color you want. It doesn't matter. Now, as you think of that connection, your intention is to think of a body part. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The very first body part you think of, it can be a really subtle, quick thought, will always be the correct one. And so let's say you're thinking of the person and you're like, okay, my intention is to think of one. And then all of a sudden you're thinking your cheek. And then you go, oh, it's the cheek. That's where you're going to hone into. Now, you can, if you want, imagine the remaining chords if there are others, and if you're not sure, you can just, to be safe, imagine it. You can imagine the other chords coming together. You kind of concentrate, imagine you don't need to know where they're coming from. They're all joining together. They're coming to the initial chords you're thinking about the other person, and you're sort of sectioning them off all together so that when you go to snip it, it's all good together. So if you're concerned, if there's additional ones, that's a great way to get rid of them. Or you can individually think of the remaining bodies of whatever pops up and then figure it out that way in order to really tailor and develop your abilities, which I highly recommend. But don't worry about it. It's more important that you remove it. So when you're going to imagine it, you're going to think of it, you're going to imagine the other person. This is when you're going to think of them, think of that chord connection, and then you're going to send love and well wishes through the line to them. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. You might be like, why love? So if you want to think of it from a spirit mind perspective or your higher self perspective, you can think of this idea of like, hey, no matter what happened or whatever is happening between us, there is the best version of them out there, and I believe they can be a better person, and just because I want separation from them doesn't mean I don't wish them well. You can think of it from that perspective. But my spirit guide says that if that's like not a place you can get into, which is fine, you're not a bad person for that. You can think of it as love being sort of the thing it's going to attach to, so it will have the love to connect to rather than you. You're kind of giving it something else to be attached to and reform. So you think of it, you're going to set the intention of like, okay, I'm going to get rid of it. And you can literally with your hands just go like this. You think of the chord and you just snip it. And if you feel it's like, oh, it's not snipping, I feel resistance, keep going. It might be a really thick one. You might need to really keep going at it. And so what you're going to do is you're going to imagine these two different lines of connections falling and separating away. You don't need to worry about anything else. You don't have to worry about if you have some loose, weird, dangly cord hanging out. Remember, it's going to reshape, form to your body. Theirs is going to form to theirs, and the influence is going to be severed. My spirit guide said that you should feel it instantaneously. That is what I mean by cords. When you feel it, it's going to feel like the sense of like, oh, whoa, I didn't realize, yeah, I did feel that. But I want to be clear though, my spirit guide says that if you keep feeling reoccurring thoughts and feelings, it might not necessarily be a cord attachment at that point. The cord might have influenced you enough to build the habit to keep thinking about them, or maybe you have some sort of things you need to personally overcome that they're associated and kind of trigger in your mindset. And that is when you're going to, after you do the cord cutting, go do your own personal work and healing. So understand that it is not an end all be all, but having that removed can heavily help you overcome the process easier, not feel pulled back into them over and over and over again. And also, for many people, if you can kind of see it quick enough, and depending on where you're at in your life, it can be an end-all be-all, and you're like, oh, whew, that's good. And remember, I just want to keep reminding you, like, you can have it between you and your best friend. That's totally possible. But you want free will. You want to have your own thoughts. You want to love them because you love them, not because you're being influenced to love them. And you just snip them, get rid of them, and you're solid. And I'm just going to see if there's anything else. Yes, there's one more thing I want to talk about. And if you're saying, well, what if I never knew about these cords? Are they just there for my whole lifetime? Is that it? No, you can get rid of cords from just simply not thinking about the other person, associating with them for a long enough time period. It will eventually dissipate. It will take a while though. So if you want a quicker process, this is it. But understand that it naturally, if it's not being fed this type of attention and keeping the influence up, it can, over a long period of time, eventually dissipate, become very thin, and break apart all on its own. So Very interesting. See how you can either let time heal it, or you can be a little more part of the process and proactive. So yay, that I said everything I wanted to say. I hope that it better helps you understand why we have some certain type of reactions, because it's great if you found your soulmate or you found someone you're really in love with, but like, you don't want it to drive you kind of bonkers, you know what I mean? Or if you feel like, why can't I let this go? This could be a part of it, and it's super easy to get rid of and remove. So please let me know in the comments below, what did you think? Are you removing cords right now as you're chatting during the video? I'd love to know. Also, I completely forgot to prepare some topics for next week's video that I have to choose from. So you will either see them at a later point in time, maybe right as this video is posting, maybe I already have the options down in the comments below, or maybe I'll set up a poll in the community tab. I'll try to come up with something soon. Other than that, I am always happy to take suggestions, but please have these suggestions be more topical and broad. So things like angels, things like the Akashic records. Oh, I could do chakras. I could look into chakras, things like that. If you want me to look into the spirits of plants, that's a thing. You can talk to them. I've talked to Mon. Whatever you want, I'll put a couple options below, or you're welcome to choose your own. And whatever is the most popular will get chosen, but I will happily do all of them at some point in time. So don't forget to help this video thrive with also a like, a subscribe, hit that notification bell, share it, help let it live, help other people remove their cords. I am wishing you the best. I will see you in the next one, but Mon and I both will. Wait, let me grab a leaf. Goodbye.